Hey everybody, in computer science principles, welcome to Unit 5, Lesson 9, Traversals Explore. Today we are going to be learning about a new vocab term in coding in JavaScript called a traversal. And a traversal is really just a combination of lists and loops that we've already been talking about this unit. And we're going to use some slides here to help us see this in action. So let's say that we wanted to examine the following list of temperatures. We've got pretty basic list here. I set it up as a variable temps and has 1, 2, 3, 4 different items in the list, right? These will have an index of 0, 1, 2, and 3. What if I want to know if a value is in the list? What method, if you were just going to look at the list, what method would you use to look for an item in a list? Most likely you would just scan your list looking at each item until you find the correct one, right? That's what you would do with your brain. So that's something that we want to train a computer to do with JavaScript, with our coding. So how are we going to do this? Computers are really good at checking things one by one. And to do this, we are going to use a for loop. We are very experienced with for loops, right? So let's see what we're going to do. This is where we assign the starting value to the counter variable I. Usually we assign it to 0. What else starts with 0? The index of a list, which is great. And that also starts with I, which may be where I comes from. This is the Boolean expression that is checked to see if the loop should continue to run, right? When working with a list, we want to access every element in the list. So we're just going to keep the loop going until we have hit list.length, right? Because the index goes up to 1 less than list.length. So once we hit list.length, we'll be done. And if we always just use .length, then we won't have to worry about if our list changes length during our code. The for loop will still work and still access every single member of the list. We're going to replace list with the name of our list. In this case, we're going to replace it with temps because temps is what we called our variable slash list earlier on. The counter variable I, as we know, is going to increase after each loop runs. It'll increase by 1 each time. That's what plus plus does, and that's what we've been using so far. So that's not anything new. To access each element in the list, we're going to store the element in a variable inside the for loop. Let's try this out with what we're going to be calling the traversal machine here in this lesson. So right inside of our for loop, we have var, a new variable that we are creating inside the for loop only. It's going to have the name element, and it's going to be temps bracket I. So it's going to equal that specific index's value from the original list, right? So we're going to have a new baggie, return of the baggies, right? You don't need to create this on your own. It'll just be in the video. And it's going to be called element. And we're going to be using that just to show what's in that value. It's kind of like a watcher from code.org. All right, so here's our code. We're going to run this for loop for the first time and assign I to 0. Well, bam. Notice how the variable in this baggie has changed, right? So we have a variable I, and right now its value is 0. Each time the loop is executed, the variable I increases by 1. So right now, this first time through, I is 0, which means that we replace the I over here with a 0, right? Now let's look at the list below. Right now, I equals 0. We're going to evaluate the statement in the for loop to see what value is stored by the variable element. So right now, since we're looking for temps bracket 0, right? That's the value in the list that has the index 0. Remember, the indexes are 0, 1, 2, and 3. So we are talking about the first value here, and that's what's going to be stored in the variable element according to that line of code, right? All right, so now we're going to run the loop for a second time. Well, bam, I now equals 1, and we can evaluate the statement inside the for loop again. So this time, temps bracket 1 is the second number in the list. So the variable element is going to be given the number 85. Now we're going to repeat. Well, bam, I now equals 2. we evaluate the statement inside the for loop again. So this time, element equals 89 by the end of this. All right, and we're going to repeat. I now equals 3, wha-bam. Temps bracket 3 is the value 65, so that's what gets stored in the variable element. Now I equals 4 after that time that we run through. And what is going to happen next? If you're paying close attention here, temps.length is 4. There are 4 items in the list temps. So now I is not less than 4. I is 4. So since 4 is not less than 4, we exit out of the loop and we're done. So the final value of element was 65. And that's it. Are you starting to see a pattern here? We're able to access each item in a list by using a for loop. This is called a traversal, and that is the vocab word of the day. We are traveling or traversing through a list one element at a time. Now that specific code was kind of silly, right? Because all we did was change the variable element each time, but we didn't really do anything with it. But we can do stuff. And so let's take a look at this. We're going to look for a number in the temps list. So here's our same variable temps list again. We've got similar code, but this time we've got extra stuff after we set up the variable element. So let's take a look at this if statement. If the element is equivalent to 85, so that's, remember, a Boolean expression, it's going to be true or false. So if that's true, in the console log, it's going to write out element found at index and then whatever number we're at. Else, it'll say not here and then keep going, right? So we're going to run this same code again and see what happens. And here is the final result of the console and the final result of the variable I. I'll walk you through this step by step. So starts out with I of 0, right? And so temps bracket 0, that's the number 77. So element would be 77 first. And 77 is not 85, so it's going to print out not here. That's the first line in the console. Then I becomes 1. 1 is still less than 4, so we run this again. Now temps bracket 1 is 85. If element is 85, this time it is. We are going to be printing out element found at index plus I. Well, I is still 1, so it's going to say element found at index 1. Then it's going to start over. Now I is 2. 2 is still less than 4, so we run it. Variable element equals temps bracket 2. That's an 89, so right now element is 89. That is not 85, so it's going to print not here. I is increased to 3. 3 is still less than 4, so we run this again. Variable element equals temps bracket 3. This time that's a 65, so now element is 65. If element is 85, and it's not, so else is not here. So there's our fourth line in the console, not here. And then I is increased to 4. 4 is not less than 4, so we're booted out of the for loop. All right, so that is how that one works. Hopefully that makes sense. And you can see that this is now become somewhat of a useful for loop because it showed us that we could search through a list for a certain number and print out where it was. Now we want to find the smallest number in the list. I'm going to reduce the list to the smallest number. And we're going to need one global variable at the start. So I'm going to create the variable min, which is going to equal temps bracket 0 to start. So it'll be the first value from the temps list. So it's going to start at 77. Take a look at what our for loop now does. It still has the same first line. It sets up a variable element, which is going to be the current value of the list, whichever index we're at. Now we have an if statement that if our current element is less than our former minimum, we're going to change the value of minimum to the value of element. So as we run through this list, as we get to a smaller value of temps, minimum is going to be replaced by that new element until we get to the end. And by the time we get to the end, we're going to find out that the smallest number in the list is 65. Let me walk you through that. So we'll start off with I of 0. When I is 0, we run through the for loop. Our element equals temps bracket 0. So now element is 77. Is 77 less than min? Well, remember, min started as 77, so that's not true. So we don't do anything. So min is still 77. I increases to 1, we restart. Is 1 less than 4? Yes, so we run the for loop. The element is now going to equal temps bracket 1, so now we have 85. Is 85 less than 77? No, so we don't replace anything. We restart. Now I is 2. Element equals temps bracket 2, so 89. Is 89 less than 77? No, so we don't do anything. Last run through, I is 3. Element equals temps bracket 3, which is 65. Is 65 less than 77? Yes. So now min is going to equal the value from element. So we're replacing min, which used to be 77, with a new value 65. And then we go back to the top. I is now 4. 4 is not less than 4. So we're booted out of the for loop. And min was 65 at the end. So that is the value that we end up with. All right, so that's how that worked. Okay, for this last example, I'm not going to walk you through it. I want you to try to walk through this. Think about what you think this code will do, and then write about it in today's Word documents. So take a look at this example. I have a list of animals from which I want to filter some elements and store them in another list. So here's our setup. If we have a variable animals, that's going to be a list. It's going to have all these animals in it: zebra, alligator, fly, dog, ape. Then we're going to have another list called animals list A. Notice that it's using camel case. So the first word is lowercase. The second two words have the first letter uppercase. This is the code that's going to go inside of our loop. So let's set that up. Everything at the top is the same, but since our list is called animals, that's what I'm changing this to now. And I put this down here at the bottom of the screen for your reference. If element.substring parentheses 0, 1 is the same as the string A, then we're going to append an item to list animals A, a certain element, and we're in the console log, we're going to write added plus element plus list. Otherwise, we're going to write out nothing to see here. Okay, so I want you to try to run this and see what you think the console will look like at the end. That is your goal, okay? Feel free to pause this screen if you need to take a look at it in order to fill in the Word document. Good luck. All right, and the key takeaways from this video are as follows. We use a for loop to traverse a list, visiting each element one at a time. Each pass through the loop, the counting variable changes, usually by 1. We can access each element by evaluating list bracket I in the for loop. Once we know the element at each spot in a list, we can do different things with it. Here are a couple examples of the things that you saw today. Filter, which is to create a subset of elements from the original list. And reduce, meaning reduce the list down to a single element, for example, the smallest number or maybe the largest number in a list. So that's a couple things that you can do. And that is it. So that's the end of this video. Make sure that you complete the rest of the Word document. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.